So I'm assuming people can see me. My name is Paul Ruth, and I'm on the Fabric leadership team, and I'm here to show you some of the new feature highlights that Ilya alluded to in his brief little introduction. And I'm also going to show you a demo of us trying to do some some initial P4 experiments on Fabric, and with proof of concept of it working. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna get going. Let's move next slide. Okay, so Ilya talked a little bit earlier about the sites that we have available. The last time we talked in the workshop in the spring, we had our 3 initial dev sites were up and running. We still have those dev sites up. These are at Renzi, Kentucky, and LBNL, and these will continue to be dedicated for development as we build out the rest of the features on Fabric. But the production sites have started to be deployed. We have quite a few of them available. Ilya said, I forget how many he said were available in his last slide. There's new ones that come online. Seems like just about every week there's a new one, and they're in various levels of availability so far. So as far as the users that are on the production sites right now, there are 6 sites they can see and actually actively use. There's a few more that they can see, but don't have any resources delegated yet, although those resources are available. And there are a handful of beta testing teams that are actively using these production sites and helping us work through bugs and different features. There's also, we're pretty excited about the Fabric native DWDM connections that are up, the very first ones. So if you remember from our previous presentations on the dev sites, these dotted lines that we have on our maps represent the connections that are still using the Internet 2 L2S layer 2 services for connections, kind of in the Genie style. But in the production sites, we have, we're still using some L2 or Internet 2 L2S connections, but we also have some of our dedicated DWM connections. These namely are between Starlight and NCSA, as well as Starlight and University of Michigan. And there'll be more of these deployed over time. These are quite complicated to get everyone on board and deploy them. So we're quite excited about it. And these are the links that will allow us to give quality of service guarantees to your experiments, as well as pretty high bandwidth capabilities at 100 gigabits per second or even higher sometimes. We also have corresponding dev and production copies of our portal and system service, as well as the Jupyter hubs for each one. So like when you're using the production site and you're using the Jupyter hub on the production site or the portal on the production site, you're not using the dev sites, which is great. So we can work on Jupyter hub and portals and other system services without interfering with production. So this is all available currently today. Looking ahead, we have in this early spring, so in February, hopefully, we will have a few more sites that are available. I've been told it to be a total of about 15 production sites and 3 dev sites. These are the ones we will have. So the additional ones that we'll get will be at Salt Lake City, UCSD, Dallas, Florida International down in Miami, Georgia Tech, Clemson, and the Great Plains Network in the center of the country. So we're pretty excited about this. I think as we start getting more sites up, building capacity, we'll probably think about adding more users as these become available. Also exciting is that we will have more DWDM sites in the core of the network, and you can see these are our projected connections that we'll have. So we'll have some interesting loops that we can create in strategic places in the country in order to support your experiments. We also will have our first peering connection for IPv6 traffic. So this is sort of a reminder, maybe people didn't really know, that Fabric has 3 different networks that are available to your experiments. We have the sort of Genie-like L2 networks that are currently available and we've been using, and most people kind of understand how those work. And we also are going to have an IPv4 network that spans just the Fabric sites and is isolated from the rest of the world, but you can use to connect your experiments together. But lastly, we'll have a public IPv6 network. So we in fact, or Fabric is an IPv6 AS, and we will peer with the outside IPv6 internet. And hopefully, what we'll have by early spring is the first peering with IPv6 public internet via Starlight. So that's exciting too. And it's worth noting that when you create your experiments, you'll be able to choose any or all of these different types of networks based on whatever you're trying to experiment with. So you can build combinations of them or just have one type if you like. Also, we're excited to announce that our first international fab site will be hopefully deployed in April. And this will be at CERN, and there's others that will follow. We're kind of in the phase now where every time I look up, there's a new site that's being deployed, and there's a whole bunch of them in the pipeline. And we'll see. We're excited to see all the new ones. This is moving forward in a strange way. Okay. We also have a lot of experimenter-facing capabilities that we've deployed. So what we've talked about so far is just the hardware we've deployed, and now this is the experimenter capabilities. So we have more. Obviously the production topology that we just talked about, but we also have some system services and the portal. So within the portal, we have a more advanced way to view the available resources, manage your projects. You can view your slices in the portal in an interesting way using something called Cytoscape. And I'll show you that in later on in this talk. And we have a way for you to manage your Fabric API tokens. And this is a way for you to get a token that you can then download to your laptop or some other service and interact with the Fabric system services from outside of Fabric. We also will have SSH key management coming soon, so you can manage the keys that you're going to use to access your slices. This is particularly important because on the production site, we're going to require that you use a bastion host to access your VM slivers, regardless of if it's IPv4 or IPv6. And this is, based on our experience with Genie and Chameleon and Cloud Lab and all the things we've worked with. A lot turning over like raw access to things to a lot of users invites a lot of hacking, and you see a lot of Bitcoin mining and a bunch of other things that go on, not on purpose, but just you're exposed to the internet, bad things happen if you're not careful. So we're going to require the management plane go through a bastion host. We also have what we call our knowledge base, and it's a learn.fabrictestbed.net. It's a set of documentation that I'll briefly show you, as well as a corresponding set of user forums that we're trying to encourage people to use the forums to ask questions and help each other get through the different problems and challenges with using Fabric, as well as help each other build more interesting and advanced experiments. The Jupyter Hub's coming along. We have the Jupyter Hub that we had, it was there before. But what we've done in it is to continue building out our set of sort of Fabric-blessed notebooks that will be pre-installed in a Jupyter Hub container that you can easily launch. It easily gets your tokens and some keys, and you can just go ahead and run. And you have a bunch of example notebooks that will help you learn how to use Fabric. All of the tools that we have installed in the Jupyter Hub are also available for you to install anywhere else. I in fact use it from my laptop quite a bit, and you can use PyPy to install these APIs and libraries in various places. The next thing we're building out is some examples on trying to show you how to use Fabric in interesting ways that it was intended to use. So So I have a little demo that I'm going to show towards the end of this talk, and it's sort of a step closer to helping people use Fabric in the way it's intended. So if you remember, this is a slide that we have shown before in other contexts, and it shows the example uses of Fabric and includes bumping the wire for measurement, as well as processing of processing of packets for various reasons. We have hardware acceleration of switching using either smart NICs or P4 or FPGA NICs. And we're hosting applications in the core of the network. We have in-network inference, so like doing AI on accelerators like GPUs in order to do extra smart things to route your packets or maybe cache data or whatever it is you're trying to do in the core of the network with Fabric. And we also want to be able to connect experiments to external facilities like IoT facilities or 5G networks or different cloud test beds, Chameleon, Cloud Lab, etc. And the ability for you to deploy non-IP protocols. And this is interesting too, because you can do this using things like P4 that I'm going to show you in a minute, where often with P4, what people like to do is they take regular IP traffic, but they add their own custom headers on the front of of that traffic in order to do something interesting or more efficient when crossing their particular network. So for this particular demo, what we're doing is highlighting the user programmable P4 switches. Now, the longer term, we're going to have actual Tofino-based P4 switches available in various places in Fabric. Now, a lot of you that have used Genie and these kinds of shared cloud and networking infrastructures before, testbeds before, will know that it's really hard to take a switch like a P4 switch or an OpenFlow switch or just any kind of switch and slice it and have it shared amongst a bunch of different users. And this is very difficult when it's a programmable switch like a P4 switch. So when we do get these Tofino switches, it'll be really hard to have them be simultaneously shared by multiple users, which will make them a very scarce resource because we can't have too many of them in a lot of places, both because of just financial costs, but also the cost in terms of space and power that we're pretty limited on. So we're going to have the real Tofino switches, but we're also going to have this Xilinx FPGA-based P4 solution that we're working with Marion Lacer at Northeastern to help us get the Xilinx cards to operate as small P4 switches that will have like 200 gigabits worth of network connectivity going in and out of the card and be able to operate at line rate. But while we're working towards that, we're trying to get people started. So we're going to work on deploying P4 software switches in a way that people can use to learn how to use Fabric, learn how to use P4, and start thinking about developing their applications across Fabric. And then we can move these P4 applications to the actual hardware's FPGAs and the hardware switches in the future. So in trying to figure out how to do this, I was tasked to try to figure out how to get P4 working in some sense of that for the users. I started looking at these P4 Lang tutorials, which any of you who have been looking into P4 before have probably come across these. These are some of the best tutorials on how to figure out how to use P4 in the first place. These tutorials, they basically have a virtual machine that they run, and they use a software switch called VMV2. And in their tutorial, you download the virtual machine and you run several copies of the VMV2 software switch. And then they have some tools that connect them using Mininet. And then they have a GitHub repository with a bunch of exercises, and you can download these P4 tutorials and their exercises, and you can follow along. And they have sort of partially done P4 code that you have to complete, and you're learning how P4 works in the process. They also have a series of YouTube videos, which if you're trying to learn P4, I highly suggest you go find these YouTube videos. They're really good. They're very long. You can dedicate like 20 or 30 hours to watching them all if you wanted to, and they'd probably be worth doing. And this is a great place to start with P4. So The problem is with this, in my mind, is that one, that there's a virtual machines using Mininet, so it's all within one system is where you're going to run this, and you don't really get the feeling of like what happens when you spread it out across like a bunch of real switches with real bandwidth and these kinds of things. So my goal was to try to take these tutorials and figure out if we could run something similar on Fabric. So conveniently, for all these tutorials they have this basic topology that they use over and over again, and that they build using Mininet, and then they install their P4 exercises in these tutorials, or in this topology. And the topology looks like this. It has 3 switches that are connected in a triangle, and each one of those switches has a host connected to it. And they have, these names, H1, S1, S2, H2, and so forth. And the ports on the switches are aimed in a certain way. And then they have this series of exercises that works on top of this topology. So what I wanted to do, and what I did, is I took that topology and I mapped it to a Jupyter Notebook that will be available in our Jupyter Hub. Basically this Jupyter Notebook is a recipe for creating the P4 Lang topology that they use in their tutorials, but creating it on Fabric. And what it looks like is 3 P4 switches. These are, in this case, they're VMs on Fabric, but these VMs have PCI pass-through to actual physical NICs on the Fabric sites. And then there's layer 2 connectivity between the switches that could span the whole country and eventually the globe. And then we have on each one of these switches is connected to another VM that's also local to that particular site, and we have the same sort of dedicated PCI devices that are connected to the switch. The way I did this is I actually I created a Docker image that has all the tools that are required to run the BMV2 switch, and a bunch of other tools to compile P4 programs and various other things. And I put it in a Docker image, and now this notebook, when it launches this topology, it runs the Docker image inside of each of these switches, and then plugs in the interfaces on the PCI devices that come in to this particular VM, plugs them in, like starts the BMV2 switch, and plugs in the correct interfaces to the correct ports on that software switch, and then you have that, right? So the software includes all the tools and the tutorial packaged in Docker Hub, so you can just launch this, and now you have all the tools and the exercises all inside of this whole infrastructure. And the key here is that I've ported all of these tutorials to Fabric by replacing the Mininet that they were using with actual Fabric resources. So you can actually have hosts that are spread out across the country connected with these P4 software switches and run the same tutorials. And once you figure out the tutorials, you can run your own P4 switch that does whatever it is your experiment wants to do. And hopefully, in the future, we can replace these software switches with Xilinx cards, and then ultimately Tofino switches for your experiments. So for the rest of this time, and I have about 20 minutes, it looks like, I'm going to go through and show you some of the new features. I'm going to start with the portal and some of the other things, and then I'm going to show you this P4, a demo of the P4 tutorial, and show you how the notebook works and interact with it maybe a little bit. Okay, so let's switch over here. You guys see my portal? Yes. Okay. So this is the Fabric portal. One thing you can notice is we now have more sites that are up. I'm going to go ahead and log in. You log in, of course, with your institutional ID. It looks like I had already logged in earlier, so it remembers me. Hopefully that works. We'll have to see. So if you can highlight these, and you can see the different amounts of cores and RAMs and NICs and things that are available. You can also go over here. We have this more advanced version of the resources here. And you can actually come down here and look at the different sites, and you can see in numbers like how many FPGAs and shared NICs and stuff there are. You can search around, and eventually we'll be able to show you things happening in Europe and so forth. So this is a lot of the work we did on the portal, or Ashura did on the portal, is to build out this ability to view all the resources. Of course, we've seen some of this before. This is the way you would manage your projects, and I think we showed this in the last workshop. But there's a lot more. It's a little more cleaned up, and there's different views of it. These are actually some of the very first the beta testing projects that have been allowed to access the portal. There's only a few of them. You'll hear more about some of them later. In this particular in this workshop, they're going to talk about their projects, and I won't go into how you manage it. You can create accounts and add users to your projects and so forth. We have this new experiments tab. I mean, the experiments tab was there. I thought I deleted that. Let me see. Okay. You can see the experiments tab. The experiments tab is interesting because this allows you to actually view your different experiments. So this is I'm going to view the tutorial, the slice viewer of the tutorial slice that I have pre-baked, so I can show you. And what this is you can see these boxes. Each box is a site. So you can see that this box up here is at NCSA, and this one's at TAC, and this one's at Max, which is in Maryland. And each one of them has 2 virtual machines in it. And like I said in our for P4 Lang tutorial, and we want one VM that's going to act as a switch, and this is the VM at TAC that's acting as a switch. It has a ConnectX-5 SmartNIC with 2 25 gig ports on it. Those are the 2 ports that connect to other switches that are on the other sites. And it also has a shared NIC, which is a SROV virtual function that connects to a local VM that is the host one. So you can see, if I click on here, I can see that this is switch 3, and it has so many cores and disks and so forth. You can click on the NIC, and you can see it's a ConnectX-5 with dual port, 25 gig, and so forth. And the different resources that you have, you can click and you can see their settings, and you can move these around, and like this will get more advanced over time. This is the first go at this, but it's working. It looks pretty nice. So this is an actual slice that we have up that I'll show you in a minute here. But this is how you're going to interact with and view some of these slices through the portal. Yeah, and then also in the experiments, you can we have this manage tokens settings, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to mess up my tokens right now. But if you create a token here, it'll allow you to download this token, and this token is the token that you will use to access the Fabric services remotely, and it's pretty useful. I use it remotely. I use Fabric from my laptop more than I use it from the Jupyter Hub for various reasons. I just got used to it. So under experiments, we can see all your slices. Obviously, I have a bunch of slices because I've been debugging things and building things. Yeah, and then under links, we have our knowledge base, which is useful. I think we showed this a little bit previously. In this knowledge base, it's basically where you're going to get all your static documentation for Fabric. And some of the main things you might look at are the getting started guide. This shows you how to like create an account and like log in for the first time. And when you finally need to get an account, we will probably point you to this getting started guide so you can get going. There's a technical users guide that has a bunch of information about the API and how to use Jupyter and how to use the Bastion hosts and these kinds of things, which will be useful. There's a site and resource descriptions, so you can see the different types of hardware that the sites have in gory detail. So you can go look at that if you want to know exactly what kind of hardware there is. There's release notes. So like every time we release a new version of software, you'll see different amounts of or different features that are now available. So this is pretty useful. This is going to be where your go-to place to get the static documentation that we're producing for you. Now another piece of this knowledge base that is very useful. We want everyone to know about this so that you can start asking questions here as opposed to asking us personal questions. But there's a forum, and inside this forum, we have these discussion questions. So like you can see that a lot of the beta testers have been asking questions already. So you can see there's somebody had a question about, the SSH isn't working. So Nasir answered the question yesterday, it looks like. For now, most of these questions have to do with like, how do I create an account and how do I get permission? How do I get my SSH keys working? We've been having a lot of churn right now because the Bastion hosts have been released, so people are being required to learn how to use the Bastion host, which can be tricky, but people will figure it out eventually. But our hope is that people ask questions on this list, not just about like how to SSH in and stuff, but also like how to create, like you can propose like, I need to make an experiment that has this particular feature. Does anyone know how to help me with that? And us as the admins will be able to answer those questions, but also other users that might have done something similar in the past might share with you how they're doing this. So hopefully this is a good spot to ask questions, because all of us can answer the questions here, but other users can ask them and answer them too. And if you have a question, you might be able to search through these questions and find somebody else that asked it already, and just not have to ask the questions. So that's key, right? So that's really important. So this is the knowledge base plus the forums. The forums are the go-to place to ask questions. You'll get a better response there. And then of course there's the Jupyter Hub, which I'll launch here, which I think we showed in the last workshop. To log in again, hopefully it doesn't ask me to log in. So, and now in this Jupyter Hub, as soon as it comes up, so when you launch Jupyter Hub or when you launch your own private Jupyter lab on our Jupyter Hub, you get your own private container that already has your tokens. Like that login session right there, what that did is it created your tokens and put them in the right place, and now you can just go. And you will have in your pre-installed in your Jupyter, in your container, will be a set of notebooks, which it'll be under Jupyter examples. And in here, there's a Start Here notebook, which will actually show you how to it'll walk you through different tutorials. So we have this list of tutorials that's growing, all the way from simple things like Hello Fabric, how to create your first slice, up to advanced things using GPUs and networking, all the different types of networking. There's a Kubernetes cluster one that one of the beta testers is using. And I'm going to add into this complex recipes, I'll add this P4 notebook when it's more finalized. So your place to go to learn about Fabric is your Jupyter Hub, and you click on the Start Here notebook, and then you'll have a list of a bunch of other notebooks. Let me just open one just to kind of show you how it works. Like if you wanted to create one with the layer 2 bridge, it shows you how to, basically if you just run all of these commands, you'll create a slice that has an L2 bridge, like a local bridge with a couple nodes connected to a network. And then it'll show you how to configure the nodes with that IP address and so forth. So everything you need to know is probably, or most things you need to know are probably in one of these examples already. If you just go to those, you can probably learn it. And if it's not in there, you can ask questions on the forum. It's still under development, so I have it in a beta functionality location. This Fabric P4 BMV2 notebook, and I will open this up right here. And this particular notebook, it does the P4 language tutorials. It has a link to the knowledge base and the forums. It also has a link to the tutorial, the P4 Lang tutorial page, where you can see the different tutorials and you can look through, whoops, I clicked on one, the different exercises that you might want to run. I'm going to run this basic tunnel one for now, or today, and show you how that works. But it has, if you go to the basic tunneling exercise, it has instructions on how to run it, shows you the topology. They show you how to run it using their MiniNet. I'm still working on getting the notebooks to have instructions so that people can follow it and run it on Fabric, but we'll get there. If this notebook, I'm going to go ahead and just run the whole thing, but then I'll go through it. So this will just run the entire notebook. And as it's running, I'll walk through it and show you what is happening. So the basic, the top piece here is like the same as all the other notebooks for the most part. And mostly just sets up your keys and the pointers to the different services. One thing that's different, if you had seen this in the past, but you're looking at it for the second time, this Bastion username and key is a new piece because this notebook will actually access the management plane of your VMs via the Bastion hosts. I don't think that ran. I'm going to run this for real. Okay, there, now it's running. And then it sets up the pointers to the services. Here we're creating the slice manager, which is the object you use to interact with the services. Here's a list that shows all the resources that are available. You can see the list is getting longer. It's growing every day, it seems like. So we have different sites in NCSA and TAC and Utah and so forth. And different links are available. A little picture that shows the topology. There's actually, in the next session, some of the students that have been working with us have done a really interesting GUI to show a really interesting GUI that embeds into Fabric. And it actually has a really nice way of depicting this. So I'll actually let them show that. But you can see there's some sites here and a ring, and then there's another spur off of that, and then some individual sites that aren't yet connected. Then I've been starting to do this where I added these utility functions in this particular cell. These are interesting things because there's things like execute a script on a node, or upload a file to a node, or download a file from a node, or wait for a slice to be up. And these are all things that, as we're developing these exercises, we're realizing these need to be in the API. So I think a lot of these will end up moving to the API eventually. But these are just utility functions. And now we're going to create the slice that we talked about here. This next step will create this slice. The first step here is to like name the switches. I'm just naming them exactly the same thing that the P4 tutorial names them. The hosts are named H1. The IP addresses are the same IP addresses. In this case, in this example, I'm going to put them all at max, but it'll work if you put them on different places or different sites as well. And as you saw in the example that I already had up, at wherever it was, TAC, Max, and NCSA, I think. Then we have create the slice. So this actually goes through and it adds these nodes and then adds these different smart NICs and shared NIC components, and it pulls off the interfaces so that it can go down here and add the interfaces to the network services, which plug them all together. And then we can see it submits the slice, and this has already been submitted because I ran the whole tutorial, and it came back and said, here's our slice ID. And now the next section is using that utility function that I wrote up there. That's wait for slice, and you can see we're waiting for the slice to come up. And this takes some amount of time, so it's probably not going to finish by the time we're done here. So that's why I had the pre-baked one that's all ready to go. And then the next step is it gets the topology. Just prints it off so you can kind of see what you got. This is a tricky part. Like, we're actually having a challenge right now. We're trying to find the mapping of the interfaces inside the VMs to the interfaces that you requested, because every OS names their interfaces however they wish. So we need to try to figure that out. Obviously, that just finished, so that slice is up. And now it's going to try to find the mappings of the NICs. And this is actually a little tricky, and it manually does this. We have a technique that we're going to use to solve this in a better way, but it's not ready yet, so I have to do it in this sort of clunky way right now. And then down here, we'll see how we're configuring the nodes. And this is, I find, a little bit interesting. So we have this utility function called upload file. So what you can see here is I have these Python files that I have in my directory called script, and they're right here in this script directory, right next to the notebook. I have a bunch of scripts. And the way I've been doing this is I upload the script file, and then you can call the other function that executes the script file. So it's a Python, you call the script, and then you pass the two parameters, and then it'll run it. And you can execute this other script, which actually does some apt-get install of some various things. So this is a good way, I think, of doing this, is that you can have these scripts that kind of sit right next to your notebook, and then you can just upload them and execute them, and then you can change them. And then when we get down here to configuring the switch, this one's actually quite interesting, because this router setup container.sh or shell script, if we look at it here, we can open it, we can even edit it here. The basic thing it does is it runs this Docker container, which is currently in my Docker account, but we'll move it to the Fabric Docker account and make it available to everyone. It is available to everyone, but it'll be in a standardized place. But the next thing it does is it takes the list of interfaces, and it takes them and it connects them, it disconnects them from the virtual machine that they're sitting in, and passes them to the Docker container that is going to run all these exercises. And then inside the Docker container, it takes this basic tunnel and it copies. In this case, we're going to copy the solution to the in-use P4 function, because this is actually, we're going to cheat and we're just going to run the solution. This will compile the P4 code, and then this last one will start up the switch using that compiled P4 code, and it'll have the different ports be connected in the right way so that it'll work. So this is a way that we are actually up here. We're setting up the VM to have the P4 tutorial as well as all the software to run it, and then we're going to plug in all of the Fabric circuits into that Docker container in the right place. And now here's a way to start the switch with the different interfaces that go to the different Fabric circuits, plug them into the interfaces in the right way. So once we do this, we go back, I'll just look at my slice again. It ends up looking like this, right? So we have these 3 sites with these 6 VMs, and inside these shared VM, or these switch VMs, we have 3 NICs, or 3 interfaces, and they get plugged into physically around the Fabric infrastructure. And now the switch gets run in here with the P4 compiled P4 code that the user can work on, as well as with the and they can control it. That's how it works. So I have this is one of the switches I'm logged into. If we look here, actually I need to switch. You can see that there's a Docker image running. You can see that I'm in the wrong one, I think. Oh, wait, no. Oh, yeah, that's right. And then if I do sudo docker exec -it Fabric P4, which is the name of the container, and then just run a bash shell. You can see inside here we have all the tools that are needed for this. And we can see inside the tutorials. So if we go into tutorials, this is the tutorials from the P4Lang exercise or tutorials. We can look at exercises. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go a little bit fast. And inside here, we can see the exercises. And inside here, we can see the basic tunnel. And inside the basic tunnel, we have our different P4 programs. So basic tunnel, less basic tunnel P4. And you can see the P4 code that is running. I'll leave that for you to learn on a different day. But you can also see that we have the simple switch running using that code, right? So now what we can do, we could watch the logs inside the switch, and we can like run it. But we could also we can log into the host, two of the hosts. And what this application actually does is it creates, let me set these up in a way that looks sort of reasonable. It takes the two hosts that you want, and it creates up a tunnel between them through the two P4 switches that has a custom header on it. And when it does that, then you can send traffic between the two hosts with this custom header, regardless of the IP addresses, because it's in a tunnel. I think I'm actually running out of time, but I could log into the host, and then I could actually run it and show the traffic going. But I think you get the point. The real key here is that we have this notebook that will set up the base topology for you to run all of these tutorials. We hope that's useful to people. But the idea being, in the future, we're going to have Xilinx and Tofino. I think I'm supposed to have time for questions, but I don't think there are time for questions. What do you think, Brittany?
Yeah, we could probably take just one or two. There was a question in the Q&A that just said, what would be the best way to try this P4 fabric?
Talk to me, and I can show you. I can share with you this notebook, and then help you walk through it. It's sort of a proof of concept for now. So I think that there's going to be some glitches and stuff, so we'll have to work through it. But what I would really like to help someone try to use this, so that we can get through all those and make it really simple for everyone to use. So yeah, I guess send me an email.
And I'm sure too, Paul, you'll be available in the lounge during the breaks, so people can find you there. We are at noon Eastern, so we'll move over to the students. I did want to mention one thing. Paul mentioned there was the Learn site. Something I wanted to add to that is, on the Learn site, there are also forums, which I think you mentioned, but I just wanted to make sure you all know that that's a great place to ask questions and engage with the community there as well.
I would say if you ask questions in the forum about the P4 switches, I will answer them there, and that might even be a good place, because there might be other people that go there to try to learn about it as well. So that'd be a good place, so we could all share this experience, as opposed to having individual emails and things.
And there's also a place on the forum, one of the threads is a place for you, the users, to post out information as well. So check that out. And thank you so much, Paul. And we'll see you all in the next session with the Student Showcase.